The argument began in a silence so thick it could have broken glass. "Ma'am, that's my dad's signature." The room went still. Every head in the boardroom turned toward the young woman standing by the door, her hands clutching a folder so tightly her knuckles were white. The CEO, a woman in her 50s with hair as sharp as her reputation, stared at her like she'd just spoken in another language. "Excuse me?" the CEO said, her tone brittle. The young woman swallowed. "That signature on the wall plaque you just unveiled. It belongs to my father, James Carter. He was a janitor here 20 years ago." The words hung in the air, fragile, uncertain. The plaque gleamed under the soft lights. It bore a single phrase engraved in bronze. "Greatness begins in the unseen." Beneath it, a looping signature, James Carter. For a moment, the CEO said nothing. Her throat moved, but no sound came out. Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably, their faces flickering between curiosity and disbelief. The young woman continued, her voice trembling. "He used to say that all the time. Every night he came home from work. I'd ask him why he worked so late cleaning offices that weren't his, and he'd say, 'Greatness begins in the unseen, Maya. Don't worry if they never say thank you.'" The CEO leaned forward. "You're saying you're his daughter?" "Yes." Maya's voice steadied now, fueled by something raw. "And I just want to know why his name is on your wall." The CEO looked at her as if seeing a ghost. Outside, rain began to whisper against the windows, tracing cold silver trails down the glass. And deep within that sound, memories stirred, of a man who once mopped the marble floors long after the lights went out, humming softly to himself. Back then, no one noticed James Carter. He was invisible. The man who appeared at dawn and disappeared before dusk, always carrying the scent of pine cleaner and worn leather gloves. His presence was marked only by polished floors, emptied trash bins, and the faint hum of old gospel songs echoing through the corridors. But there was something about him, something humble yet unshakable. He used to stop by the old lobby mural every night before leaving, a faded painting of a rising sun over a city skyline. He'd stand there, mop in hand, whispering to himself words no one ever heard. And sometimes, when no one was watching, he'd pull out a small sketchbook. Inside were designs, ideas, notes, and scribbles about improving the company's workflow, layouts, and even innovations in waste management. He believed in doing things better, even if no one asked him to. No one knew it then. But James had once dreamed of being an engineer. He'd studied by candlelight when he was young, but when his father fell ill, he quit college to support his family. Cleaning floors became the way he held the world together. But he never stopped thinking like a builder. He saw systems where others saw mess, potential where others saw waste. And one night, decades ago, when the company faced a crisis with a malfunctioning air filtration system, James noticed something the engineers had missed. He drew a quick redesign on a piece of brown paper, left it anonymously on the operations desk, and went home. The next morning, the system worked flawlessly. The CEO at the time never found out who had fixed it. But on that scrap of paper at the bottom was signed one simple name, James Carter. The company kept that paper, framed it, used it as a symbol of innovation born from anywhere. No one ever traced it back to him, until now. In the boardroom, the CEO's eyes glistened as she stared at the signature on the plaque. She remembered the story, the anonymous genius who had once saved the company during its darkest week. They'd built a motto around his words. They'd built culture around his quiet brilliance. But she had never known who he was. And now, standing before her, was his daughter. Maya's expression was steady but bruised with memory. "He died 5 years ago," she said softly. "Never knew the company even remembered him. I was walking through the lobby today and saw his handwriting on your wall. I almost couldn't breathe." The CEO exhaled slowly, her voice cracking. "Your father was James Carter?" "Yes." She paused, the silence heavy with decades of forgotten gratitude. "He worked here every night. I remember him. He used to hum." Maya smiled faintly. "Always did. He said music made the dust move easier. The CEO lowered her gaze to the plaque again. Her reflection shimmered over his engraved name. And in that moment, something inside her began to unravel. The polished pride, the years of boardroom victories that suddenly felt small. She turned back to Maya, her voice unsteady. "I think you deserve to know the whole story." It was late when she led Maya into her office. The rain outside had deepened into a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat against the glass. The CEO, Evelyn, sat behind her desk, opening a drawer. She took out a yellowed folder, edges curling, marked with dust and time. "I've kept this," she whispered. "All these years. No one knew who he was. We tried to find him once, but the trail went cold. Inside were copies of the maintenance reports, sketches, and notes from that long-ago week. And there, on the final page, was a simple schematic, drawn in pencil, signed with the same looping name. Maya ran her fingers over it, her eyes misting. "He used to draw just like this. Said lines were like prayers. They had to lead somewhere." Evelyn looked up, her composure gone. "He saved this company, Maya. We were one malfunction away from shutting down. That design changed everything. It inspired the motto we live by now. But we never thanked him." Maya shook her head gently. "He never wanted thanks. He just wanted to leave things better than he found them." Evelyn's eyes filled. Then he did. The clock ticked quietly between them, marking the weight of time. The years that had swallowed a man's name. The silence that had buried his story. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt small, not in defeat, but in humility. Because sometimes greatness really does begin in the unseen, and in that quiet, she realized something else. She had built a company on a stranger's wisdom, but she'd never built a heart around it. Now, sitting before her, was the daughter of the man who had done both. Evelyn leaned forward. "Would you let me tell his story publicly? I want everyone here to know who James Carter was." Maya hesitated, her fingers tightening around the folder. "He would have liked that," she said softly. "But more than that, he'd want the people cleaning your floors tonight to be treated like they matter." Evelyn nodded, tears finally breaking free, and in the hush that followed, the rain outside began to slow, turning from storm to drizzle, until the only sound left was the faint hum of the building, steady, alive, and clean, as if the walls themselves remembered him. The next morning, sunlight poured through the office windows, soft and golden, like forgiveness made visible. But inside Evelyn's chest, there was still a storm. She hadn't slept all night. She'd sat in her office staring at the plaque, at his name, at the truth that had slept beneath her company's story for 2 decades. She kept hearing his daughter's words. "He'd want the people cleaning your floors tonight to be treated like they matter." That sentence had lodged itself deep in her conscience. Because for all the awards, the headlines, the speeches about innovation and excellence, the company had never looked beneath its own reflection. It had never looked into the unseen. Later that morning, when Maya returned, she wasn't dressed for confrontation. She wore a simple cream blouse and carried a worn photo. A man in a blue uniform standing beside a mop bucket, smiling as if he carried light in his chest. "He took this the year I graduated high school," she said softly. "He couldn't afford to buy me a dress for prom, so he stayed late that week, overtime. Said the floors paid for the shoes." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Your father. He looks proud." Maya smiled faintly. "He was, but he never told anyone what he did here. Said humility was his legacy." Evelyn leaned back, her eyes unfocused. "You know, every time we have a new hire orientation, we point to that plaque. We tell them it came from an anonymous worker who believed greatness begins in the unseen. They take pictures with it, post it online." She paused, her voice trembling. "But none of us ever thought to ask who said it. Maybe because we were afraid the answer wouldn't fit our image." Maya met her gaze gently. "Maybe it fits better than you think. That afternoon, Evelyn did something she hadn't done in years. She walked the building's lower floors. She passed the break rooms, the IT corridor, the mechanical bay where the hum of machines felt like the company's quiet heartbeat. And then she saw them. The janitorial staff, bent over their work, silent, invisible. A man with tired eyes pushed a vacuum. A woman scrubbed the lobby glass until her reflection disappeared into it. Evelyn stopped. "Good morning," she said softly. The workers looked up, startled. "Morning, ma'am," one of them replied cautiously. She hesitated, then asked, "How long have you been with us?" 8 years, the woman said. "Night shifts mostly. Don't see the big folks much." Evelyn's eyes softened. That's about to change. They exchanged uncertain smiles, but when she walked away, she could feel their surprise follow her down the hall, like a question hanging in the air. Back in her office, Evelyn called the HR director. "I want every maintenance and janitorial staff member in the next company assembly," she said firmly. "Front rows," the HR director stammered. "But ma'am, the assembly's for the product reveal." "I know," Evelyn interrupted, "and I'm changing that too." She hung up before the director could protest. "From now on, this will be given annually to anyone, regardless of position, whose kindness, courage, or unseen labor changes our company for the better." Applause erupted, echoing like thunder through the hall. But this time, Evelyn didn't cry. She felt something deeper, not sorrow, not pride, but grace. The kind that bends the world back toward rightness. After the ceremony, she found Maya standing near the back, tears glistening but calm. "You didn't have to do that," Maya whispered. "Yes, I did," Evelyn said, "because your father wasn't just unseen. He was unheard. And that's what I want to change," Maya smiled faintly. "He would have said, 'See how the light moves when you tell the truth?'" Evelyn laughed softly. "Then let's keep moving it." They stood there. 2 women joined by a man's invisible kindness, a kindness that had outlived him, changing hearts he'd never meet. Later that evening, Maya walked through the lobby one last time before heading home. The floors gleamed beneath her feet, and for a fleeting second, she could almost hear it. Her father humming faintly in the distance, a tune carried on memory. She looked at the plaque again, but now it felt different. It no longer belonged just to him. It belonged to everyone who had ever worked unseen and given their best anyway. She whispered, "You did it, Dad. They finally see you." Then she stepped outside into the soft dusk. The rain had long dried, but the streets still shimmered, like a world freshly cleaned. And somewhere far above, between fading sunlight and rising stars, it felt like a man in worn gloves was smiling down, proud that grace had found its way home. Weeks passed, but something about the company felt changed. Not in policy, not in slogans, but in pulse. The hallways seemed brighter now, not from new bulbs, but from something unseen in the air. A gentleness that hadn't been there before. People greeted the night shift workers by name. Executives began stopping to talk with the janitors in the morning. The cafeteria filled with laughter that once hid behind doors. It was as if the building itself had started breathing again. Maya noticed it the first time she came back to visit. She had been offered a consulting role, director of community and legacy programs. Evelyn wanted her help to carry on her father's spirit through the company's new initiatives. At first, Maya hesitated. She'd spent her whole life running from the shadow of his mop bucket, from the embarrassment of saying, "My dad cleans offices." Now that shadow had become light. When she accepted the offer, she didn't just see it as a job. It was an inheritance, not of money or status, but of meaning. Her first project was simple. She began collecting stories from other unseen workers. One by one, she listened to the cafeteria cook who had once slipped leftover food into boxes for struggling interns, to the security guard who stayed late every night so a single mother on the cleaning crew could catch the last bus home. Each story carried a rhythm, quiet sacrifice, invisible care. And every Friday, she shared one story at the end of the company's morning memo. She called it the Unseen Journal. At first, people skimmed it. Then they started waiting for it. Some even printed the stories and pinned them on their desks. By the 3rd week, Evelyn noticed something extraordinary. Employees began nominating others, not for promotions, but for kindness. And when the first Carter Hale Award ceremony arrived, The entire company showed up early. Evelyn stood on the stage, her voice steady. "Our greatest progress," she said, "hasn't been in profits. It's in how we've started seeing one another again." Then she turned to Maya. "This program, this change, wouldn't exist without her." Maya shook her head. "It exists because people remembered how to care." But one evening, long after the celebration, Maya returned to the old maintenance storage room, the same one where her father used to keep his tools. It was nearly forgotten now, tucked behind the basement elevator. She pushed the door open, and the scent of dust and pine cleaner drifted out, the same familiar comfort that made her eyes sting. Inside, nothing had changed. The old clock still frozen at midnight. The steel cabinet still marked with scratches from years of use. She ran her hand across the worn workbench, whispering, "Hi, Dad!" And then she saw it. A small wooden box, half hidden behind a shelf. She pulled it out, heart thudding. Inside lay a few personal items, an old pocket watch, a small notebook, and a folded paper tucked between them. The note was addressed to Maya. Her breath trembled. She opened it slowly, the paper fragile and yellowed by time. "My dearest girl," it began, "if you ever find this, it means I'm gone. But I hope you're still dancing with life the way your mama used to. I don't know what you'll become, but I pray you'll remember this. Work is never about how many people see it. It's about how much of your heart you leave inside it. If they never say thank you, let that be proof you're doing something real. The unseen things last the longest, sweetheart. Love is one of them." Her tears fell silently, soaking into the words. She pressed the paper to her chest, whispering through the ache, "I see you now. I really do." The next morning, Maya brought the note to Evelyn's office. The CEO listened in silence as she read it aloud. By the time she finished, Evelyn's hands were trembling. "That's not just a message to you," she said softly. "It's a message to all of us." She looked out the window at the morning light stretching across the skyline. "Do you realize he's still teaching us, even now through his words?" Maya nodded, her voice breaking. "That's what I want to build. Next, something that keeps teaching long after we're gone." So they built it. They created the Carter Institute for Human Work, a program that offered free mentorship and skill training for janitors, maintenance workers, and staff who dreamed of learning trades, design, or management. "Your father believed in systems," Evelyn said during the opening. "We're building one that believes in people." The first night of the program, the classroom lights glowed like tiny stars. Workers who'd spent decades sweeping floors sat beside interns and executives, all learning together. The air was filled with nervous laughter and quiet wonder. Maya watched from the doorway, hands folded, heart full. She thought of her father, the man who used to hum while polishing the marble floors, dreaming of blueprints he'd never get to build. And now here they were, people like him learning to draw their own. Months later, the first graduates of the Carter Institute walked across a small stage to receive their certificates. Many of them cried. Some held their children's hands. One of the graduates, a middle-aged janitor named Luis, shook Maya's hand and whispered, "Your dad gave me courage. I never knew I could be more. But now I'm starting my own cleaning company, with benefits for people like us." Maya's throat tightened. "He'd be proud of you," Luis smiled. "He already is. I feel it." Later that evening, as the building emptied and silence reclaimed the halls, Evelyn found herself standing by the plaque again. She touched the cold bronze surface, her reflection shimmering beside his name. "I used to think legacy was what we left behind," she whispered. "But maybe it's what we pass forward, unseen, through the lives we lift." Behind her, the lights dimmed slowly, and in that hush, it almost felt as if the walls were listening, holding the echo of a janitor's laughter, a daughter's promise, and a company's awakening. In the months that followed, the Carter Institute became a movement. Other companies began adopting similar programs, inspired by the story of a janitor whose wisdom changed everything. Reporters came. Awards followed. But Maya never let the story lose its soul. Whenever someone asked her what her father's greatest invention was, she'd answer, "He didn't invent a machine. He invented a way of seeing people," and every time she said it, Evelyn would smile, because that, she knew, was the truest form of innovation. That winter, Maya visited her father's grave for the first time since the unveiling. She placed a single bronze leaf beside the headstone, a replica of the company plaque, smaller, worn, but still gleaming in the pale sunlight. She brushed the stone gently. "Your words built a world, Dad." A breeze stirred, soft and tender, carrying the faint scent of pine. She smiled through her tears. "Guess you're still cleaning up after us." The wind whispered through the trees like laughter, and in that moment she knew his work was never finished. It just lived on through every hand that chose to care, every heart that learned to see. Winter melted slowly that year. The frost retreated from the glass towers, and sunlight began dripping through the skyline like spilled gold. Inside the company, the hum of life had changed. Not louder, not faster, just truer. The Carter Institute had expanded. What began as a quiet idea now pulsed across the city. New companies were joining, offering scholarships, apprenticeships, and community training. Evelyn and Maya watched it unfold with disbelief that often felt like grace, but something else had begun too, something neither of them expected. The story of James Carter had gone viral. News stations ran segments about the janitor who saved a Fortune 500 company. Social media swelled with messages, janitors, bus drivers, nurses, factory workers, each sharing their own version of the unseen. One message in particular stood out. It came from an email address neither of them recognized. The subject line read simply, "I knew him." When Maya opened it, the words made her hands tremble. "I worked with your father at the plant before he joined the company. He once helped me fix a ventilation problem after hours, even though it wasn't his job. He refused payment, said, 'We don't charge for keeping people safe.' I never forgot him. I'm an engineer now because of him. Thank you for reminding the world who he was." The email was signed, R. Hale, retired. Maya's throat closed. She looked up at Evelyn, eyes wide. "It's him," Evelyn smiled softly. Robert Hale. The man who had risked his career to tell the truth, alive, watching from somewhere quiet. They decided to find him. It took a few days. But when they finally located him, he was living just outside the city in a small retirement home. The nurse said he kept to himself, spent most of his time sketching blueprints he never planned to build. When Maya and Evelyn arrived, the nurse led them to a sunlit corner of the garden. He was there, thin, white-haired, sitting in a wheelchair with a notepad on his lap. "Mr. Hale?" Maya said softly. He looked up, blinking against the light. "Yes?" She hesitated. "I'm James Carter's daughter." The pen fell from his hand. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then his eyes filled with tears. "My God! He talked about you every night." Maya knelt beside him, gripping his frail hands. "He remembered you, too. We found your letter." He shook his head slowly. "I tried to tell them. Tried to make them see. They called me a fool." Evelyn stepped forward, voice trembling. "You weren't wrong. You were just early." He looked up at her, recognition dawning. "You're the one who finally said his name?" "Yes," she whispered. "Too late, but I said it." Mr. Hale smiled faintly. "Not too late. Some truths wait until people are ready to hear them." They spent the afternoon talking. He told them stories, how James used to draw redesigns on napkins during breaks, how he stayed late not because he was paid to, but because he couldn't bear to leave a job half done. He believed in finish lines, Hale said, even if no one else was watching. When they left, he pressed the notepad into Maya's hands. "He'd want you to have this." On the last page was a simple sketch, two hands holding a single gear, surrounded by words written in shaky pen. "Systems break. People fix." Maya folded it carefully, knowing this was the last missing piece of her father's story. Spring came like forgiveness. The Carter Institute announced its biggest milestone, the opening of its new campus, built entirely on community donations and volunteer work. The design incorporated ideas from janitors, engineers, architects, and students, a literal fusion of every unseen hand that had ever held the place together. At the grand opening, hundreds gathered, employees, families, alumni, and people whose lives had been changed by the story of James Carter. Evelyn stood on the stage, her voice steady but emotional. "This building isn't made of steel and glass," she said. "It's made of stories, of people who believed that kindness and hard work aren't small things. They're the structure holding everything else up." She turned toward Maya, who stood beside her holding her father's old sketchbook. "James Carter taught us something the world too often forgets, that the unseen are the ones who keep the lights on. Today, those lights belong to them." She stepped aside, and Maya walked to the podium. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each word. "My father never asked to be seen. He only asked to leave things better than he found them. But now I realize he was building something bigger than floors or machines. He was building people, teaching them that no matter where you start, you can shape the world with grace." She opened the notebook, showing the crowd the page with his final words. "Systems break. People fix." The audience rose in quiet applause, the kind that comes from souls, not hands. After the ceremony, Maya slipped away to the back of the new campus, to a quiet room she'd designed herself. It was small, lined with photos of the company's custodians, cooks, guards, and maintenance workers, each name engraved beneath their portraits. In the center stood her father's mop, cleaned and polished, resting beside his old work gloves. A plaque above it read, "The Foundation Room, dedicated to those who keep the world standing." She stood there, tears sliding freely now. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. "You built something that will never fall." And in that silence, she felt it, that familiar warmth, like the scent of pine and evening light, wrapping around her like an unseen embrace. Later, as she and Evelyn stepped outside, the sky was turning to gold. Workers were heading home, talking softly, laughing, their faces open, their spirits unguarded. Maya looked at them and smiled. "He would have loved this hour," Evelyn nodded. "Why?" "Because he said twilight is when work becomes holy, when the world doesn't see what's still being done, but heaven does." They stood quietly for a while, watching the horizon bleed into the color of peace. And as the first streetlights flickered to life, the city seemed to bow its head, as if acknowledging all those unseen hands polishing, lifting, building, healing. That night, when the janitors came to clean the new building, they found a small handwritten note taped to the plaque in the foundation room. It said simply, "To the ones who walk unseen, thank you for making the world shine." Maya Carter and Evelyn Ross, one of the janitors, smiled and whispered, "Guess we're part of history now." He dipped his mop into the bucket, humming softly as he began to clean. The tune was old, gentle, and carried through the hallways, the same one James Carter once sang decades ago when no one listened. Only this time, the building listened back. The walls echoed with gratitude. The floors gleamed like new dawn, and for the first time in its long life, the company no longer shone from above. It glowed from within. And somewhere, beyond time, a man with kind eyes and calloused hands looked down from the quiet unseen, smiling, knowing his lesson had finally taken root, because greatness had never lived in the light. It had always begun in the unseen. For years, the company had celebrated innovation, profit, and progress, but not the people who built the foundation of it all, the ones whose names never made the reports, whose work began when everyone else went home. It was time to change that. Meanwhile, Maya found herself wandering the building's archives. Evelyn had given her full access. Every folder, every photo, every record from the past 3 decades, dust floated in the air like forgotten stories waiting to be remembered. She found old maintenance logs signed with her father's handwriting, notes scribbled in the margins like quiet conversations with time, repaired valve manually. Recommend new seal design. Or, checked vents, small leak near western duct. Fixed with tape for now. We'll revisit. Each note was humble, methodical, but layered with care, as if he believed every screw and hinge had a soul. At the bottom of one folder, she found a small envelope sealed with tape. Faded handwriting read, "To whoever finds this." Her breath caught. She opened it carefully. Inside was a folded piece of paper, creased from years of sleep. "If you're reading this," it began, "I hope you're having a good day. Maybe I'm gone by now. That's all right. I just want to say something. If anyone ever wonders who cleaned these floors, tell them I was proud too. I did my best. Every night I tried to leave things a little better than I found them. Because one day someone else will walk these halls chasing something big, and maybe they'll never know I was here. But that's okay, because greatness doesn't always wear a name badge. It's enough to know you've helped build something worth standing on." Her hands trembled. The paper smelled faintly of pine cleaner and ink. She pressed it to her heart, and for the first time since he died, she felt him again. Not in memory, but in presence. The day of the company assembly arrived like a turning page. The auditorium filled with hundreds of employees, designers, engineers, managers, executives. Whispers buzzed through the room about why the janitorial staff sat up front, about the mysterious change in schedule. Then the lights dimmed. Evelyn walked onto the stage. For once, she didn't have her usual confidence. Her voice came out softer but truer. "Good afternoon," she began. "Today we were supposed to talk about innovation. But I realized something. Innovation isn't just what we create. It's how we remember." The room quieted. She gestured toward the plaque on the screen behind her, the one that read, "Greatness begins in the unseen." For 20 years, this quote has defined our company's spirit. It came from a man no one knew. Until yesterday. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "His name," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "was James Carter. He was one of our janitors." The silence that followed was absolute, Evelyn continued. "He fixed a critical system that kept this company alive, anonymously. He left behind wisdom that built our foundation. And we've honored his words without ever honoring his name." Her voice softened to a whisper. "That ends today." She turned toward the front row where Maya sat frozen, tears pooling in her eyes. "James Carter's daughter, Maya, is here with us. And from this day forward, our annual Innovation Award will bear his name, the Carter Honor for Greatness in the Unseen." The crowd rose in applause. Slow and reverent, Maya stood, her hands shaking, overwhelmed by the sight, an entire hall clapping for a man who had once been invisible. After the assembly, people approached her, young engineers, old executives, maintenance staff. One woman whispered, "My father cleaned schools for 30 years. Thank you for reminding us it mattered." A young intern said softly, "I started as a janitor in high school. Hearing this makes me believe I can build something here." Maya could only nod, her heart too full for words. That evening, as the building emptied and silence returned, Evelyn walked with Maya through the lobby one last time. The plaque gleamed softly under the lights. "He used to stand right there," Maya said, pointing to the corner. "Said it was the best spot to see the sunrise reflect off the glass." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Then that's where I'll start tomorrow. Watching the sunrise from his place?" Maya looked at her. Tears balanced on her lashes. He would have liked that. Evelyn reached out and took her hand. "He taught me more in 2 days than I learned in 20 years of leading." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the building filled the quiet, steady, peaceful. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered across the wet pavement like 1,000 small promises, and through the glass, a faint reflection lingered. A man in a blue uniform, smiling as if proud that the world had finally remembered his name. That night, the city pulsed with quiet light. Cars whispered down rain-slicked streets, and above the glass tower that bore his name, the stars began to return. Hesitant but sincere. Inside, long after everyone had gone, Maya sat alone in the lobby, The plaque shimmered softly under the dim lamps. Her father's words glowed like they were alive. Greatness begins in the unseen. She traced the edge of the bronze with her fingertips, her chest heavy with a mix of pride and ache. The applause, the tears, the recognition, it had all felt like a dream. But now that the noise had faded, she felt the emptiness that always followed the echoes of love long gone. Her father was still gone, and she never got to tell him that the world finally saw him. The sound of soft footsteps drew her from her thoughts. Evelyn approached quietly, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "I figured you'd still be here," she said gently. Maya smiled faintly. "He used to say the night belonged to the ones who cared too much," Evelyn chuckled. "Then I suppose we're both trespassing." They sat together in silence, sipping the lukewarm coffee. The air carried the faint scent of pine, the same scent her father used to leave behind every night, as if his soul still lingered in the hallways. Evelyn turned to her. "You know, I've led this company for 12 years. I've given speeches about vision, progress, innovation, but none of it ever made me feel like today did." Maya tilted her head. "Because of him?" "Because of what he believed," Evelyn said softly. "He did the kind of work no one noticed, yet everything depended on it. And I've spent my career pretending the unseen didn't matter." Maya looked down at the reflection of her father's name on the floor. "He used to say the only real kind of leadership is love in motion. I never understood it until now." Evelyn smiled sadly. "He sounds like a poet disguised as a janitor." Maya's eyes softened. That's what he was. The following weeks moved differently, slower, more deliberate. Something had shifted in the company's rhythm. Evelyn changed things. She replaced the automated cleaning budget reports with handwritten acknowledgments, personal notes of gratitude signed by her and other executives. She opened a fund in James Carter's name, scholarships for the children of janitorial and maintenance staff. And every Friday morning, before the first board meeting, she walked the lower floors with a cup of coffee in hand, greeting every worker she met. People began to notice. Not just her, but the way the company started breathing again. Less like a machine, more like a heartbeat. But transformation always comes with ghosts. One evening, while Evelyn was sorting through old records for the company's anniversary event, she found something she had never seen before, an old letter addressed to the previous CEO. The paper was thin, typed and yellowing. "Dear Mr. Lawrence," it read, "I'm writing to let you know about a worker named James Carter. I've been covering the night shifts with him for the past few months. I think you should meet him. He's got ideas on good ones, but I'm worried no one's listening because of his uniform. Please, just give him a chance." It was signed simply, Robert Hale, Assistant Engineer. Evelyn frowned. The name tugged at something distant. She searched the archives again and found it. Robert Hale, an employee who had left the company the same year. James's design had saved the system. She found his file had terminated after a disagreement with management. And beneath the notes, scribbled in red ink, she found one final line. Claimed a janitor designed the new system. Dismissed for insubordination, Evelyn's breath caught. The truth burned through her. James hadn't been entirely invisible. Someone had tried to make him seen, and they'd paid for it. She couldn't sleep that night. The thought haunted her. How many people had been silenced because their voices didn't wear a title? How many truths had been swept away like dust? By dawn, she made a decision. When the company's anniversary event arrived, the one broadcasted to investors, partners, and employees worldwide, she wouldn't just honor James Carter. She would restore every voice that had been buried beside his. The auditorium was filled again, brighter this time. Banners hung from the ceiling, lights glimmered against the stage. Evelyn stood at the podium, her heart steady but heavy with purpose. "Last month," she began, "we discovered the name behind our company's greatest lesson. James Carter, a janitor who showed us what greatness truly means. But today, I learned there was another name we forgot." She paused, the silence taut. "Robert Hale, an engineer who tried to tell the truth when no one wanted to hear it. He lost his job for believing that brilliance doesn't depend on a title." The audience stirred, whispers rising like wind through leaves. Evelyn continued, voice resolute. We owe him an apology, and today we give him one. She lifted a framed certificate, the Carter Hale Human Spirit Award.